Okay, so calling this meeting of the Affordable Housing Committee to order on today, the 9th of September, 2025. We have no guests, so it's just three of us, and the meeting is being recorded. So I think the only agenda item we have is to review the recommendations for the Select Board and our report to the Select Board. And that was sent out by SJ earlier today as well as over the weekend. So if you had any comments on those, I think SJ, maybe you can walk us through the report and comments you've received, and we can say whether we like or dislike those comments as we go forward. Does that make sense? Or
Um,
is there something you had in mind that I'm jumping
no,
through?
uh we've got June meeting minutes to approve.
Ah,
But you both weren't at that meeting, right?
I was not. So
So we're gonna
we
have to
can't
table
approve them.
that. Okay, so let's table that. Sorry, I'm taking notes. Um, okay. Yeah, so I will walk you through the document. Um, and thank you both so much for helping. Um, let's see. This one.
Okay.
Can you all see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So I think for the most part, what I said in the email is that a lot of the information in this report is new, and a lot of all of our recommendations are very similar. I think they're informed by more things, but they're all kind of the same recommendations overall that we've been making. Um, the Eric, I'm just not good at being brief.
It's
But
okay.
I like, your push last year and for a lot of these reports is always a good one, which is to have like a top line findings front page that if you don't read anything else, if you just look at the front page, you got all the take home information, which is kind of what this top page is supposed to be.
Hmm.
Um, I will say, um, Chris Flynn had requested to look at a copy of the document and then sent a couple of minor edits, which I think he CC'd everybody on.
Hmm.
I've made notes of them in here so that we can discuss them, but I wanted to point out the two discrepancies that we had between us with the number of certificates of occupancy and the number of building permits. I need to clarify with him because I counted what is on record, and so I'm not sure what he um, isn't uh, what isn't making it on his list, but is in the land records. So I just need to follow up with him to clarify what that is. I think it might revolve around the camper, which we can get to when we get to that spot. But anyway, so I haven't incorporated those changes yet because I want to follow up with him and make sure that I understand um, what is and isn't counting for him.
Okay.
Um, Most of this was wordsmithing, but one of the things that Chris Flynn um, two things that were kind of sticking points for Chris Flynn had to do with the HOA recommendations. And
Hmm.
I knew in writing this, I think we've come up against this as a group, that it is a little tricky because what the town can dictate, like the town can't dictate what an HOA puts in its covenant, and the town's legal counsel has been really clear about not wanting the town to even provide guidance for legal documents. On the other hand, I think that the town often provides suggestion and ideas and, states its preferences for things like where shrubs are going to be. I mean, Frederica, you've attended more DRB meetings than I think I have. So, like, there is some purview to, even though you can't dictate things, to um, at least communicate the town's priorities. And so I think the wording that Eric, you suggested and offered, um, I put in here, Chuck, I think, had another place where he kind of changed the wording to talk more about encouraging instead of the words that I used, like eliminating. That we're really more about persuasion and less about kind of dictating things. So I think that the recommendation around HOAs is still an important one and still that we as a committee need to kind of investigate. And I think it stays. I just think that the change in wording by encouraging is maybe the better way to go than eliminating. The other,
Can I
yeah,
say something about that, or
yeah, please.
yeah, okay. I guess I have trouble accepting the guidance that we have been given. And I recognize that that's maybe just my problem, but I, s- I'm just going to go and verify independently that that some of that is really, I would like to either touch base with the town attorney and hear from him or herself directly, because I think we've all gotten it secondhand. Or kind of look at this independently if I can find an answer. Because I think there is a state law saying that ADUs are legal and must be legal. And I'm having trouble thinking that an HOA, by virtue of existing, can subvert state law. I just have trouble with that concept. So it may just be my problem, but is there any way that we could get this directly from the town attorney? If not, I'll try to get independent verification.
I don't think that we can. She's, pricey. But I do think, um, and maybe I don't know if you could reach out to VLCT. I wonder if the CCRPC would be a better
That's what I was
place to
wondering,
go.
if I should ask CP about this.
Because I think that this was something that came up in Montpelier and that they particularly around ADUs and HOAs. And so I do think that it was ambiguous last year. And I think there's some more clarity, but I don't know what that clarity is. For example, it is illegal to statewide to restrict against ADUs, but I don't know if, to your point, Frederica, to what level municipalities can enforce that,
I
or
think
Yes,
the angle's a little bit different. I believe that the state regulations were that a zoning and town ordinances could not prohibit ADUs. But an HOA is a private contract between the homeowners in that HOA. And that is a contract that is negotiated or forced upon you if you're one of the homeowners. But it's a contract entered into in good faith. So that would be kind of like saying, you have a contract with your employer to work 4 days a week, and the state has mandated that you can work 5 days a week if you want to, and you still keep working at four. You know, or the state has said anybody
or
can
is
work
it the other
three
way
days,
around?
or the state says you can work 3 days a week if you want to, but we can't force the employer to change the terms of your employment. Sure, you can work 3 days, but you're going to lose 25% of your pay. Would be the state employer's piece. So it's like a lot of these things where the state has said you can't zone, but that's not the same thing as saying you can't have a private contract between people that it's not discriminatory. It's not saying, we have said you can't discriminate based on race and gender and religious affiliation or all those things. But we don't say you can't discriminate based on income. It's if you can afford the house, you can live here. So I would
Okay.
be really surprised if that regulation was written in such a way that an existing covenant, homeowners association covenant, would be nullified through that regulation.
Okay. You know, I'll I think
But
I've
for
read
new
something to that
covenants,
extent, but
I mean, we're
for
talking
new
about,
covenants, the way that new covenants come about is that I've seen this at the DRB, that they are submitted at the same time as the whole application is submitted. So they're part of the application, and nobody's even bought a house yet at that point. So it's a
Yes.
private contract that is written and as submitted as part of the application, and that then the homeowners enter into. And I think you know, we have been able to provide input. We've even been asked to provide input by the DRB regarding affordable housing on projects. We were asked for the 91 Governor Peck one, for example, and that was held up for a while, among other reasons, because we hadn't submitted our input yet, from what I understand. So we are being asked for input, and there's, you know, I think that the way this is written now is not bad, because I think it kind of says, you know, consider asking for input or consider providing input at the time of the DRB review. And you know, back then I even specifically asked the DRB if it's okay to provide input despite not being like an interested party, and at the time we were encouraged to proceed. So I don't think that they'd necessarily be averse to us, you know, looking through an HOA and encouraging the person that's submitting the application to review that HOA covenant.
I 100% agree. That's not yet a contract in force with anybody else until the first homeowner buys into the HOA. You can adjust that however you want to. And that should be something that we request, or potentially we could say that any future HOAs must allow this. Because that's the future. That's not changing an existing contract. That's saying in the future you can't do these things. And I'm 100% in favor of saying that. Which I think sort of we have the drafts right there, and you know, we want to you move the page on me there, but encouraging the elimination of
sorry, yeah,
exclusionary developments, right, as part of the formal review. The DRB
yeah.
should say, hey, have you considered this? This would be something that will add value to your development for the people who buy homes there.
Right.
Yeah.
What? Yeah.
The other thing on this page that Chris had reacted to was the HOA, a community wastewater system being, you know, constraining the possibility for subdivision or ADUs. I think he was stuck on the word impossible, though it was followed up with a qualifying statement, but we reworded that so that it's more clear. And then everything else, a lot of it is Eric kind of cleaning up my bleh.
Oh.
I'm gonna go on, and then if we want to come back so that we've got the whole thing in our heads, if we want to come back and take a look at the top line things, we can.
I just had some like little cleanup
Sure,
word
go ahead.
thingies, and I can submit those separately if you want. It wasn't anything
Depends on the level of
important.
cleanup, but yeah, if
It's
if
just
there's
like
something bigger that
words.
you want to talk about now, we certainly can do that. If
No,
it's
it's
like a
just, you know,
comma here, then
the biggest one is probably right before it says 2024 recommendations. It says indicating public wastewater is not necessary in rural areas. And then the next sentence says commit to wastewater. So I know you didn't mean it like we don't need public wastewater and then commit to public wastewater, but maybe think about kind of
the order.
rewording that a little bit.
Um,
I would say that suggests that public wastewater can be
It's not
supplanted.
necessary. Yeah, it's not necessary everywhere, maybe, or because I
Well,
think what we're saying is we shouldn't just be stuck in Riverside with development. We
right.
shouldn't just, predicate all our development on having public wastewater. But we shouldn't say, well, we don't need public wastewater.
It indicates that private wastewater is an alternative in rural areas.
Ah, there you go. That's it. That's exactly it.
Um,
Private wastewater is an alternative in rural areas. Private wastewater systems, let's make it systems.
Are an alternative. Another question I had was the next, yeah. Another question I had was the next thing where it says 2024 recommendations.
Mhm.
Can we just say 2025 recommendations? I know you mean recommendations are derived from 2024.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more
We are more than
cohesive, I
halfway through
guess.
2025. I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, the data is 2024, and that's fine to say findings and yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
That
Let's
makes
see, there
sense.
was like something little indicating I got that stricter. Yeah, no, the rest is there's one thing else and I can't. Okay, that's all I think that I had for now.
Okay. Um, so a discussion point here. So most the Jericho housing goals is the same as last year. The affordability stuff is the same as last year, just updated with the actual numbers for 2024 from HUD and VHFA. Um, the new piece here was adding the regional housing goals for Jericho, the CCRPC. I wanted to do that because I felt like it's an important piece of information to include in the report. It's certainly relevant. And also because it supports all of the argument for growth. And on the at the rates that we've been pushing for and talking about. One of the things that Chuck pointed out was that um, the the CCRPC goal is over 20 to 25 years, and it's about 600 units over that time. And in the select board meeting where CCRPC presented the target goals, they mentioned that, and Chuck says, I haven't gone back to the minutes to confirm exactly what she said, but Chuck remembers hearing Susan, the chair of the planning commission, um, kind of underscore and support that 600 units over 20 years number. And that number also showed up again in the projected growth rate that the town supplied whoever the people were who did the wastewater feasibility study. And the reason that that detail I think is important is because it talks about a longer time frame than 5 years, and we all know that like we're not going to be done having this conversation in 5 years, and a lot of the stuff that we're talking about now we're not going to see the fruits of in just by 2028, which is when the housing resolution target ends. But also because one of the things that when we talk about wastewater, there's always that, or Riverside, there's always the worry, or at least I always have the worry that everybody's like, whatever Tetro and Wisdom House put on Riverside, that's going to like knock out all the units that we need. And we don't have to worry about housing anywhere else in town. And the 30 over 5 years is 150 units. That may be true in Riverside. Maybe we do get 100, 150 units out of Riverside. But when you think about the 600 goal, we all know that we need to be looking outside of the village centers. Anyway, so it's something that Chuck pointed out to me this afternoon that I think is worth thinking about. I haven't tried to incorporate it here, and I'm not entirely sure where, or how. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean it makes sense. It's I don't know if it's coincidental, but it's exactly the same number that we came up with, except over 20 years. So
Yep.
the math works out to be the same, except I guess the argument in part that you're making is that we won't see it all at once, and it may grow in the future even more than it is in the present. And it's good to put it in there. I'm not sure how it matches with the low, medium, and high goals that you have mentioned down there for the CCRPC.
Yeah.
So where's the math there? So 17 homes per year times 20 years would be 340. But you said their goal is 600. So that
That's over 25 years. So what's 26 times 25?
oh 20, okay. That would be 700 why are we doing 26 times 25? Oh yeah, because
Their high
750,
rate
it's like
is
close.
26.
Yeah.
For
Mm.
25 years is 650. 17 times 25 is
So it's between
425.
medium. So
So
it's between medium and high then, their 600 goal.
yeah.
And that's for 25 years, not for 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then it's a little different than our goal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the way it's written here, that you said that low 8 homes per year, and that we can do, it's almost tempting to say, okay, well, we're not doing so badly then.
I know.
We're within their recommendations. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
But
Well,
that's
and
what they said, so.
it's what they said. And yeah. And I went back and forth on how much of that to include in here. Ultimately, it just felt like, well, ultimately I settled on this is the information that felt important for our record keeping, for our,
Yeah. To have in the
I
housing
also think,
report.
I
Yeah.
wanted to really pull out the fact that they put us in mixed urban and rural. I can't remember the other towns that are in there, but like, they're not looking at us as rural. They're looking at us as having some municipal water, which we do, and they are very aware of um of the wastewater project and the potential that has, and that put us in this group here, which I think is interesting. Anyway.
Question, did they say anything about affordability in their targets?
But I don't think I'd have to look. I don't think they broke it down that way. I don't even think that they distinguished between rentals and
Okay.
not. But I'd have to look. It's been a minute since I pulled up that document. Um, check. All right, so this stuff looks the same. We talked about the home sales last time. And then we get into certificates of occupancy. Chuck's Chuck's big thing, Chuck's big take home message is really wanting to underscore the multifamily dwellings or multi-unit dwellings, and that single family homes just aren't going to cut it. And so that my conversation with him is what got me to write that last concluding bit that's new that I'm sure you haven't had a chance to look at yet. But
No,
one
I,
of
I
the
looked at it.
things, okay, cool. One of the things that was frustrating to him was he has never cared about Noah, which is fine, but that like we really want to be underscoring the multi-unit homes. And so that's what this comment was from him here, and I think that I address it later. Um, none of the um, and it's funny because I use the word condos because they are condos. But condos are kind of a type of multi-unit home. Um, they are the condos are the ones that turn over the most in Jericho. And anecdotally, it's always folks that I've talked to, the condos were their first home. And they lived there for a couple of years and then moved into their first single family from those condos. Anyway, sorry.
Chuck would totally agree with that. He keeps pointing to condos elsewhere as examples of denser and more affordable development. So I don't think that's in conflict with what he was
Well,
driving
I
at.
wonder if maybe it even is just adding comma multi-unit to condos or somehow, I don't
Yeah,
know.
I see what you're saying. You're saying there's actually absolutely no mention of multi-unit.
Yeah. And,
I mean,
to
by
be fair,
definition, condos is multi-unit, but
Yeah, but it could
putting
be
it in
more
there
than,
would
yeah,
be, yeah,
more inclusive.
yeah.
Mm,
And that would
true.
then, people don't think of a duplex as a condo, partially because often the owner lives on one side and the other side is a renter.
yeah.
Um, but so maybe the changing the housing type from condos to multifamily, because that covers
Yeah,
everything.
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, okay. So certificates of, sorry, is that cool for home sales? And we talked about home sales a couple months ago.
Mhm.
So, okay. Certificates of occupancy. The camper situation is a funny one. I wasn't sure whether to include it or not. It has a certificate of occupancy with a certificate of occupancy number associated with it. It also has a building permit with a building permit number associated with it. So I've treated it like any other new home dwelling. Um, I'm
Is it
not sure if
effectively a camper, or is it now permanently located on that facility? Meaning the tires are no, it's no longer movable in the sense of like a trailer home. Once you put it down on the pad, yes,
this
in
is why it
theory you
was
can move
this
it,
is
but
why
it's
it was
not
so
likely to.
this is why it was so confusing to me because I was like, we don't do certificates of occupancy for a temporary structure, but maybe we do. I don't know. That's part of the clarity that I need to get from Chris. Um,
Mhm.
it wasn't there wasn't anything, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not because these records are not every box and every line is not
Mhm.
checked and enforced. So the records are kind of spotty, but there was no indication that it was an ADU. And I don't know, and I don't actually think that it is a permanent structure. I think that it's a temporary situation, but I don't know that for sure.
I mean, it's
Um,
on
Well,
11.8 acres, which makes me, imagine that maybe somebody bought a lot of land and for now they just have a small structure on there?
I don't
no.
know that they are the owner of the land.
Oh,
Well, there is another issue with it. You've got that at um, less than 2,000 square feet.
Well,
Um,
yeah,
I
I don't
suspect
know how.
it's significantly less
I'm
than that.
sure it
Probably
is.
200 feet,
I
square
don't
feet is
have a
going to be the
number.
outside.
I don't have a number, but our NOAA cutoff is 2,000 or less, so that's why that's there. But I agree, it's kind of a ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
Likewise, you don't have a square footage for the tiny house.
because I don't have it. It wasn't a part
Okay.
of the, but you're right, I could. Anyway,
And I
that's the
think
story
to, to,
behind the,
to Frederica's point, it would be worth finding out, is that a permanent, meaning it'll be there for the next 3 to 5 years or more, or is
yeah,
it temporary, meaning within the next 12 months they plan to build a house?
yeah.
We have one of those on Packard Road that was a camper, one of the very, I think, a 40-footer, and it was put onto a pad and has power and water and everything on it. So it is effectively a house, but it didn't start out that way. It started out as just a camper.
Yeah. Well, and I was surprised that it had a building permit because like there was nothing to build. But maybe the building permit is for the slab. I mean, I don't know.
No,
Um, so that's the story on that, and depending on what the answer is there, it'll either stay or go. Um, 3 ADUs, the tiny house,
the tiny house that's not really affordable,
the tiny
apparently.
house that's not really affordable. So the tiny house to construct um, was about 100,000. Um, the the land was 300,000. It's a big lot. It's on Fitzsimons. It's lovely. But I all of that aside, I'm really excited to see that a tiny house was built in Jericho, that it was built in a rural district. Like, yeah, maybe it's not affordable. It's affordable to a middle income family, and it's a great way to, you know, live on a nice piece of land and either love it and stay in it because you like that lifestyle or, slowly build onto it. Anyway, um, nothing else to really say about certificates of occupancy. All of the single family dwellings are big and pricey. Um, these three are in a PUD. But at the end of the day, none of the single family dwellings that came online in 2024 would be affordable to folks. And so then I wasn't sure what to do with this. I liked this from last year's report, which was just a kind of like, this is where we wanted to be, and this is where we're at. It's kind of a clean nuts and bolts. Um, I didn't know where to put the tiny home and the camper because,
Because we don't really know, right? We don't really know.
yeah.
We don't have enough data, I think.
Yeah. So
I mean, it sounds like the tiny house, if you add up the land and the house is more middle income, right?
mm-hmm.
So I'd maybe put that over there. The
Yeah. And I
camper,
don't,
I mean, if the camper is on 12 acres of land, that alone may make it not
if they don't own the land
affordable.
and they're renting the land, like this is where it's like in my mind, I'm more excited that um we have three alternatives to the single family dwelling.
But since
And
this is a
that's
housing report, I think that putting that graphic in there when we don't really know that that's true, that there's 20 that three of them are are affordable homes. I'm not sure that we should do that. I mean, I like the graphic too, but we don't know that, right? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't have, we don't have the accurate data or data that's accurate enough to be able to confidently say that. I think that's true. I think, I think that's true. Yeah,
Yeah, so we should take that out then.
done. Okay, building permits, similarly, I'm not sure what the discrepancy is between Chris and I here. The camper, maybe I didn't include the camper, actually. It looks like I didn't include the camper. There's these two in this village center, the duplex, and then there's a single family. The address is in Underhill. It's right on the town line. The address says Underhill, but the building permit and the certificate of occupancy are from Jericho. So I
It's
assume
possible that they're on the Jericho side of Park Street.
they're
So
on
you would likely
15.
have an Underhill address. Even on, I don't know when the post office changes something from saying Jericho to
Yeah.
Underhill, but the Underhill post office is right there on Park Street, so it would make sense that you would probably use that zip code instead.
Yeah, that's true. So it was in Jericho, so I included it, and it looked like from Chris's notes he counted the duplex. So I think that that's in there. So again, I'm not sure um, which one he doesn't think should be included here, but I'll follow up on
Yeah,
that.
he had something about the lower ones too, right? That he was disagreeing with. The 15 to 27. I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't know.
Have to go back to a prior version.
Um, so anyway, so again, I think he said that he had 26, that we had 26 building permits for Jericho for
Mhm.
2024. So one of these that I have listed, either shouldn't be there or I don't know, there's a discrepancy there that we need to find. I wasn't sure about including the estimated cost in either of these tables. Like what you put on the building permit is so drastically different than sometimes than what you spend, and certainly different than the selling price. But it does kind of speak to like the size of the project a little bit. I don't know. I went back and forth about what it was and ultimately decided to include it because it's data, and call it what it is and call out that it came from the building permit and then just call it a day. But I don't know if either of you feel strongly about it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of stumbled over that in the 2024 certificates of occupancy chart, where you have both price and estimated cost. And I looked at that for a while and I was amazed by the discrepancy. And I was wondering how that comes about. Is that just the developer's cost and then they sell it at a profit? Does it not include labor? I think it's very confusing. So, so I'm not sure that, I mean, if having price and cost in the same chart, at least you look and you see that cost doesn't mean that it's going to be, affordable. But down there in the second one with the building permits, you just have cost and it makes it look a lot more affordable than it ends up being. So without any explanation, I am not sure that it reflects or that it doesn't, it's a little confusing. You see what I mean? People are going to think, well, that
Yeah.
all sounds great.
I think, yes, I went through this back and forth too, and had all of those thoughts. I think there's two there's two kind of users that I'm in, like I think we're interested in both developers and in homeowners or renter households. And there is an idea, I do think that, like, for example, for an ADU, knowing that an estimated cost can range between as low as 10,000 and up to 400,000. Like that 400,000 is probably, well, it's a 3-bedroom ADU, right? So knowing that is maybe interesting, knowing that this PUD here, and even this PUD up here, that the builders were estimating a cost of that per unit. Like maybe that's interesting. But I agree that I hate having so much missing data. Because
Well,
then you really
am
can't
I
compare things.
mistaken on this, SJ? But isn't that the price is what it sold for, and the estimated cost is what the builders spent to build it? And they're going
Well,
to almost always want to underquote that because they're going to pay a tax on it when it's being built, the sales
Oh.
tax and also the property tax on it.
Hmm.
There's a huge incentive to
underestimate.
underestimate.
cost.
Yeah, yeah.
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 Huh. Well, that would explain some of the discrepancy, because I don't think they can easily have that kind of profit margin. I don't think that would fly.
No, I mean that's 2x in most cases.
So I think I'm hearing, let's get rid of estimated cost in both
Yeah,
charts.
I think
Mhm.
I think we should, because while it's an interesting data point, it lacks the context to help everybody understand. It's better when they're both in there, although but just having the cost in there, I think, is confusing.
Okay.
Yep.
Easy. And I do want to keep sale price where I have it. It's frustrating that I don't have it for everybody. I mean, some of these places weren't sold after they were built, so, but, okay. Anything else in this section, certificates of occupancy and building permits, that jumped out at you both? It's validating that we're all kind of getting tripped up on the same things.
I thought,
Yeah.
it comes across as there being more building permits than there were last year, and more ADU type things too.
Yeah.
So that's promising.
Yeah. Okay, good. Rentals, I don't think there's anything to cover here.
Might be able to add that I don't know if there's been any new rentals in Jericho at all. I don't know if we even have
We have
any
no
kind
way of
of
knowing.
list.
We have
Yeah.
the ADUs coming online. I don't have anything listed as an apartment coming online, but it's just that data doesn't exist to know, which is frustrating. But
Yeah.
all right, the HOA inventory, I just really wanted to capture some of the I feel like there was a lot of useful information that came out of that. So is there anything here that is missing, that I didn't hit hard enough, that detracts from whatever message we want to, any comments here on HOA?
I thought it was instructive. I still think it's great that we did that, meaning that Chuck went through all that work to get that
Yeah.
data.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on to progress and recommendations. Chuck's overall notes were to remove such a good reminder for me in my language overall, but to remove, consider and reconsider when making recommendations. Like, they are recommendations, so we should say what they are and not be tentative about it. And the big kind of thing that we can talk about at the end, is he wants to bring back the list of recommendations from the last report. So the last report we had the bulleted 9 recommendations, and the select board took those 9 and used those as action items to move forward. And so Chuck's argument is that I was kind of, the reason I didn't include it was because they're all restating the same 9 recommendations from before, but just kind of massaging them a little bit because some of them have partially been met. And so it felt redundant, so I was just going to rely on the top sheet, but it is also maybe a more powerful tool to make things easier. The other thing that I want to throw on the table about this too is what I started to do is go through our list of just you haven't seen this, but kind of go through our list of recommendations from last year and kind of record which ones have been met, which ones haven't. It's a nice way to show that progress is happening. And I think it's a nice way to give credit to the Planning Commission and the Select Board for the movement that they have been making in that direction. But then on top of that, add a whole nother set of recommendations that are verbing or, regurgitating a lot of this stuff felt redundant and overwhelming. So I couldn't figure out how to handle it all. And so I decided to just ignore it and see if anybody called me out on it, and Chuck called me out on it. So we can discuss. So have that percolating in the back of your mind. And as we go through, before we get to that bigger discussion, I broke this up into kind of land use protection, infrastructure investment, and then regulatory stuff. And maybe I'll just open it up to the two of you because you guys have read this. What did I miss? What did I go too far with? I don't know. What you got?
I think I commented on that already, and I don't see a need to do much more. In terms of one element we might benefit from is to sort of, for the recommendations that we did in the past, to indicate what has the action been on that. Not saying it hasn't been achieved yet, but what has the specific thing been done? So for example, with the wastewater, we can say the wastewater feasibility study has been completed. It is waiting for the zoning regulations have been updated on ADUs. The next step is, rather than just restating the recommendations and what they were in the first time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I tried to do that a little bit in narrative here.
It's true that, it would give it more structure, I think. Because you have some of it in there, but it's not in the. I think it would give it nice structure to start with the things from last year and say, okay, this and this has happened, and this has happened, and then add new ones if we have any new ones. So I like that structure, that structural idea.
Okay. I may ask for some help on that. That feels overwhelming to me.
Does it? I mean, you already have it all there. You just have to kind of, I can probably help with that. Kind of sort it. If I have a list of the last year's recommendation, right, recommendations that we had, and then we just sort it, because I think most of it's there.
Okay. I would welcome that help. The other, all right, so then Chris Flynn's 2 kind of content comments. I think I think that his comments are that, that there's only so much you can do through regulation. The municipality is really limited in how hands-on and actively they can really influence the amount of housing that's being built. Um, and I think we all agree with that. And also these changes should happen in order to make those things happen. So yes. One of the things that Chris Flynn has been suggesting for years is a affordable housing overlay district. That's not something that we've spent much time discussing. And part of that is because I started to go down that road a couple of years ago, and the CCRPC and David White both independently steered me away from that because it's I don't know that I'm going to be able to describe it very well. Because it's zoning that only applies to certain situations and not to everyone all the time. And so it gets a little funny, particularly for a town like ours, where I think one of David White's arguments was that, we could achieve something similar by doing form-based code in a place like Riverside.
Yeah.
So I think that I just want to say out loud that we got that feedback. We could certainly investigate it more. It's something that we would have to do some real work to convince people of
I
pursuing.
remember this. I remember, the first time I heard about affordable house overlay district, and I remember, that even back then you said there were others that this had been explored, and I think another one was Susan Brzee, who was not who was kind of steering us away, maybe advised by Chris. I don't know. But so I think that, I looked at these comments, and I think I would like to take them sentence by sentence. The first thing here that Chris points out that is that the setting of that goal was way beyond what the town received and approved. Now, what does he mean by that statement?
I have no idea.
So Mike, after reading it a few times, I think is what he means, and I might not be correct, but the meaning that I gather is that our housing resolution was too ambitious. So that's basically what he's saying is the housing resolution has very ambitious goals, and it's not going to be realistic, is how I interpret that. I might be wrong, but that's how I interpret that. Basically, that he's saying that these goals are too ambitious. And the second thing is that he's saying is that you can't really influence the building of units so much by changing things like zoning regulations, because it's the market essentially at work. I would take issue with that statement, because I think everything that the Planning Commission has been doing and that we've been working on is ideas to actually have an influence on that. And I think that, if you allow multifamily housing in more zones, then I'm not sure that the market would totally not respond to that. Or if you have, so that would be one example. Or if you change the density of housing to a zero, square. Basically, what we're trying to do with the form-based code, where you basically go away from acreage altogether, and that can certainly influence affordability, because affordability to a great extent in Jericho is determined by the acreage of the zones, right? So I kind of disagree with that statement. I mean, he's being more pessimistic and maybe realistic, but I think, yeah, there's something you can do. And then the next sentence is the affordable house overlay district. We've talked about that. And then the next sentence, he says, provide the builders and the market the incentives to meet your goals. He means the incentive would be, in the affordable house overlay district regulation, which is, by the way, a way to incentivize residential unit building with regulation. So it's kind of a contradiction to what he said in the prior sentence. But anyway, we have something like that in the density bonus in PUDs, right? So I agree with him there, that the builders and the market needs to have the incentives to meet the goals. And I'd like to hear more ideas on that. And that's it. That's Chris Flynn sentence by sentence, if I understand it correctly.
That's my understanding and my sentiments too. And then this was we talked about this already with the HOA in the top line recommendations. Municipalities and their regulations do not have the ability to govern these private party documents. And so taking out any language that might imply governing, I think, is what we did. And instead we talked about encouraging and persuading, or just encouraging. And I disagree. I think that maybe we need to reword things, but his other comment is that we may want to remove that recommendation entirely. And I do think that including a recommendation around this is important. So that's that. Okay. Anything else here? And or we can jump into the conclusion. So the real push here, knowing that Chuck's pitch for the real push of this report and this round of recommendations is that it really push multifamily housing in areas beyond Village Center, in all of Jericho. And that is one of the best options available to achieve affordable housing, particularly short term. Riverside is probably 5 or more years out. The wastewater certainly is probably on that timeline. And Riverside isn't the only place where we're not going to be able to meet all of our goals there. We also know that the village centers themselves aren't going to be able to support all of the growth that we've targeted and that we're projecting. And that the data shows that new single family dwellings are just not affordable to a majority of, or more than a majority of people. And so if we want to have housing that's affordable to most people, then we really need to push for multifamily housing in other areas. And so I tried to make that statement and kind of build that argument based on kind of all of the information that we laid out in the report up until this point.
So my thought on that was, I think this is really well written and I agree with it. I get a little bit lost in our structure now because we have recommendations, and then we have a summary, and then we have a conclusion with more recommendations, and then we have the top line recommendations at the beginning, or the top line findings and recommendations. And I don't know.
So
See,
let me just quickly say that, so I only wrote the conclusion this a little bit ago. But the top line recommendations are just everything that's bolded in the recommendation section.
I see. And the conclusion, is that something we can incorporate into the recommendations instead of having in the second section, that because it kind of, you know what I mean? It's kind of another set of recommendations, isn't it?
Structurally, yes, a conclusion should be, here's everything we said and here's why it's relevant. The conclusion should tie back to the recommendation, saying, we recommended you do all of this. Here's all the background of why we made these recommendations, and we therefore conclude that the recommendations are the right ones. But that's kind of a, high school debating team logic flow, and I don't think we need to follow that necessarily.
I think
Yeah,
in
but
my
I think
mind,
having two sets of recommendations is confusing, and we have three.
I don't
We
see
have
two
the-
sets of recommendations, I guess. I don't understand. There's one set of recommendations that is summarized on the top page, but there aren't multiple I mean, there are multiple recommendations, but they're not repeated. What I have here, the conclusion is summarizing all of the data to make a final point. And then all of the recommendations are in service of that point.
Okay.
But just because that's what's in my head, if you're not seeing that, then nobody else will see that. So that's fine. Also, the conclusions, as I said, was written an hour or 2 hours ago at this point. And so I was like, let me get this down on paper. It could probably be put into the bigger document.
Yeah, I just everything made sense, and then it was almost, I guess I didn't see the connection all that clearly to what came before.
The connection of what?
If you take the conclusion, I didn't see a direct connection between the conclusion and what had come before. It's
Yes,
almost
because
like
there
it was-
wasn't any, because it was just a last minute addition to get the idea on paper. There was no transition. There was no thought to how it fit into the thing. It was just so yes, I agree it's not there because it's not there yet.
Yeah.
And the summary, like in some ways, I'd rather it just took the place of the summary, but I didn't have the time or the bandwidth to make a decision about whether the summary was useful, whether this should replace it, whether it should be integrated. And so I think these are certainly the decisions that need to get made.
But to me, the summary is maybe the opening piece of, here's the 5 things we found, here's why they're important, and here's what we think it means to you. And that would be literally almost an abstract. I mean, an abstract and a summary are kind of the same thing. Just the
And that's
abstract comes
different
first.
from that, and you think that's different from the top line findings at the beginning?
It doesn't have to be. I mean, the top line findings are, here's what we found, right? And it
And
doesn't
then
say
the
anything
top
about
line
what should you
findings?
do.
No, there's also the top line recommendations. You see,
Yeah,
we're
so that would
framing
be sort of
everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
that would be, I would combine them into one statement of, this is our summary. Here's what we found and here's what we think it means. As opposed to, here's what we found and here's what we think it means. They should be linked together.
You mean the beginning there, the top line findings and recommendations?
Yeah. And then
Okay. And
We
then
have
how
the
do
rest of
they
the
relate
document
to
to
the
show.
summary and the conclusions? Is that it's not duplicative?
Well, the summary is going to explain how we got to that top line piece that we put in there, the abstract or the opening piece at the beginning of the document again. And then the recommendations would flesh out the recommendations we've made.
Okay.
My whole understanding of the top line document is that it is duplicative. It is that if you don't read anything, if you want the crib notes, you read the top page. The
That's
actual
the
report,
abstract. That's the abstract.
well,
Yeah.
there is no abstract, but yes, the actual report starts after those. Like it's not.
Right.
They don't work in service. They give you the bulleted crib notes.
Mm-hmm.
Or they don't. I don't know
Yeah.
how to say that, but you know what I'm saying. Um,
Right.
and what the summary, how we want to end. When I was initially writing this, I felt like we needed a summary, particularly because the recommendations were scattered throughout in narrative instead of bulleted. And so it felt like it needed a kind of button on the end. And
Mm-hmm.
this was the first time that we had some commentary on like progress thus far. So it felt like we needed some kind of like, here's, saying all of those things. Here's where we think we're at, big picture. Um, but it was
Yeah.
also it was kind of a weak summary in my opinion. Like it didn't have a lot of punch. Um, and then yeah, getting to after my conversation with Chuck, I was like, yeah, I think that the real take home punch is I agree with his assessment. Um, and so how to successfully communicate that and where to put it and how to put it
Mm-hmm.
is I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. When is this due?
Sure.
Hmm?
So I imagine that um, this needs to go through one more revision. And what I'm kind of thinking is like in 2 weeks, we meet again for 20 minutes, 30 minutes online.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, everyone will have seen the final draft before that. And then we can, have a kind of quick, everybody's on board and do a public vote to approve it going forward. So in my mind, just because I don't want this on my to-do list anymore, I was thinking like 2 weeks.
Would you be okay with, I just like, to me it becomes more clear if it has a slightly different structure at the end
I
there.
would love somebody else to,
And I wouldn't cut anything out. I would just kind of try to order it maybe a little
I
differently
would
so
love
that
that.
I understand the flow better and then somehow get the what is now the conclusion, get that in there somewhere. Because I know why it is where it is, and I know it's kind of like an overall like this is really the ultimate, mentally this is where you arrive at when you're thinking what's the way forward. But I think that it would flow better if it maybe was in a different spot, or I don't know. If see, I have got another flight coming up. And
Perfect.
on Thursday. So I may be able to spend a little bit of time just rearranging it down. And that what I mean by rearranging is really just starting with the section that says progress and recommendations.
So what I'll do is I'll incorporate the things that we said tonight.
Mhm.
And then I will send you, Frederica,
Mhm.
that updated draft and then go to town. I, working in a vacuum is hard, so I think having your guys' feedback is always really helpful. And then also, it lives in my head, and no one wants to live there, so it needs to get out.
Eh,
Okay. Cool. I have one thing that was on the agenda? There's some concern that we haven't formally voted to go to quarterly meetings, even though I think we've said this in the last couple of meetings, we didn't actually take a vote on it. So I'd like to make a motion that we formally move to a quarterly meeting schedule, with additional meetings as needed.
Second.
Cool. You're muted, Chair.
Yeah, we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? I think it's a
Sounds
great
good to
idea.
me. Cool.
All right.
Okay.
All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
The vote
Thank
is
you.
unanimous, and we will go to quarterly meetings.
Cool.
That was
Do you
quick
want
and
some
easy.
HRB? Do you want some DRB happenings, or are you
Sure. Anything exciting?
DRB meetings. There were 3 DRB meetings. I would love to join the DRB, and they even have an opening, but my problem is that they're on Wednesdays, and a lot of my Wednesdays I have a competing commitment at night. So I always look at the minutes, of which there were really not, the most recent ones don't have minutes yet, but they have the recordings. So I followed the recordings of the June 25th, July 9th, and August 27th meetings. And while it is the long way to do it, it's also much more entertaining. So there were basically 3 issues that came up, spread out across those meetings, and most of them came up twice. The more relevant ones are to us is one, there is a minor subdivision being proposed at 150 Lee River. You have to imagine it's kind of a triangle formed by Lee River and Orr Road, are 2 of the sides of the triangle, and there's a 48-acre parcel there, and they want to subdivide a minor subdivision where they subdivide that into a 2.8-acre housing lot accessed from Orr Road, and then the rest is the rest. So basically the 2.8-acre lot gets taken off of that 28-acre parcel. And it's proposed, the interesting thing to me was this is supposed to have its own septic and its own well, and it's 2.8 acres, and the septic is the wastewater is being built as a large unit, but just for that house, and it will accommodate as many as 6 bedrooms. So this can be as large as a 6-bedroom house in terms of septic. So it's another large single-family house, I think, that's going up in Jericho. So that was one of them. And then the other one was a 2-lot PUD being imagined or being applied for at 16 to 18 Snipe Island Road in the RAR zone. So it's a total of 20 acres. And the current owner is selling 1 plus minus acre and maintaining a right of way. So 50% of the resulting PUD lot is going to be reserved for conservation. So it was interesting. It was a PUD instead of a subdivision. So you can make a smaller lot, but you, despite it being in the 10-acre zone, you can make a 1-acre lot as long as you conserve 50% of the overall lot. So just a nice example of, in one case, a minor subdivision, in the other case, a PUD. And where it really got interesting is that after that was all said and done, there was open comment, and there was a neighbor that spoke up, and his name is Herbert Neal. And he spoke up and said that this is a great example of why 10-acre zones don't really fit with reality. And he went on for some time explaining what he meant by that. And, in essence, what he said was, and I quote, "And this is a classic example of why 10-acre zoning doesn't fit. It shouldn't even exist. If a one parcel is adequate for well and septic, there shouldn't even be a question of how many parcels you can put on whatever. If the land is suited for the septic and the other overlays, then 10-acre zoning was a number that was picked out of thin air and it should not exist anymore." And he goes on and on in the same vein. So I point that out because it's kind of a thought that some of us have had off and on. There's, of course, risks of eliminating large zones because you can invite smaller zone sprawl. But the basic question of what is a 10-acre zone for, I thought was interesting that came up, that was raised. The third issue that came up at the DRB meetings was a parking lot. The Palmer Maple people are trying to build a parking lot, and there was a lot of very spirited commentary from all the people on Orr Road commenting on the travails they've gone through over the past few years with having Palmer Lane there. So nothing to do with our committee, just a fascinating kind of process to follow that one. And that's all I've got from the DRB.
I don't
No
have much.
affordable housing.
Yeah. On the planning commission, we're moving into the next stage of the planning bylaw modernization grant was up in front of the town, and I believe there was some there's a vote on that, I think, pending tomorrow, Thursday rather, for the last little bit, but that's been going pretty smoothly and it's out. Planning commission is moving on to working on essentially working more for affordable housing through reevaluating the zoning districts and where you can increase the densities around that. And that's going to be looking at the entire town. However, the preference has been within the corridor around Lee River Road, South, there's a Brown's Trace and Route 15 as an area for more of the growth to come about with that. So that's a big one. Plus, of course, the Riverside property areas. Bigger push we're getting also is now around wastewater. Wastewater has been an issue for a long time, and I think we finally have enough momentum coming about through the Riverside to get wastewater there. But there's also recognition that the area up at Jericho Center is in pretty dire straits because the well cones are sitting into the septic flow lines now, and people are losing their ability to get water. So we'll be working on seeing if we can get water up to Jericho Center as a part of that. And then that would then open up a lot of that whole section on Brown's Trace from Jericho Center down to the high school as able to have more dense development because of the water treatment. So that opens up the Riverside property and a few other ones. We're looking into that area as well. I am also supposed to be doing a little bit more work with the Jericho Community Development Corporation, sort of as the liaison there. I haven't been able to meet their meetings as of yet because in the summertime they're on Thursdays, and my summer Thursdays are usually pretty booked up. That'll change in another week or two, so I'll keep you posted on what I hear from them. They are working still, from what I see of their notes. They're still doing a lot on the railroad property, trying to figure out what to do next with it. Town purchased it. The town appears not to have really had any idea what they were going to do with it once they got it. So here it is now. I think it's what's been 2 years now we bought that property, and nothing's been done. So that's what I can tell you about the Planning Commission and what I know about the Jericho Community Development Corporation.
A question about, I didn't understand the issue with the wastewater in Jericho Center, something about cones. What is that?
So every well that you have for your house well draws upon groundwater, and it creates a cone, sort of a suction cone of broad-based water coming up into the water pipe itself as the pump works on it. And when you have a leach field that is within a certain distance of that cone, the leachate will get into the cone that's drawing up the water into your house. And apparently a lot of the leach fields in Jericho Center are now starting to encroach upon the well cones as well. So we've heard anecdotal evidence of one or two houses where they cannot drink their water because it's been
Okay,
infiltrated by leach field.
I see.
And the big issue with all of that is that the cost from the wastewater survey was higher than most people wanted to think about doing. And the number of houses there is difficult to get economies of scale coming into play. But there's supposed to be someone who's supposed to be looking at, I think it was being put forward at the front of the select board to reach out to like Lake Champlain Water District and find out what it would take to extend the pipe from the high school up to Jericho Center.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Did either of you happen to watch or read minutes from the first wastewater task force meeting?
I did.
Did?
I got almost all the way through. I wasn't totally focusing on every minute, but it was a long meeting. It was 2 hours, which seemed long at the time when I was watching. And that was the only one that there was, right? I think it was the constituting
think
meeting
so.
to some extent.
Yeah.
And they brought a couple of interns that they had over the summer working on, how to go forward with this. And the interns spread out far and wide and got surveys done and talked to a lot of people, and kind of came up with some recommendations that sounded really well-founded. And they focused initially on how to get the community on board, how to do outreach, how to educate, and so that was part of the focus. And then the meeting also focused on how are they going to run this task force, who's going to be the chair, who's going to be the vice chair, who's going to be the contact person, because the interns reported on successful wastewater projects elsewhere in the state. And one of the elements was that you needed to have somebody that people could contact. And then they tried to talk about, what is the timeline? What are the next steps? And what is the budget? Where does one of the what are the constraints in terms of the timeline? And one of the points is going to be trying to get something into the budget at town meeting, right? And then the big thing, of course, is going to be a bond vote, I think, is from what I understood. And question arose about $100,000 that were approved in the budget last year, right? And what's actually happened to those $100,000? Where have they gone and where should they go? And there wasn't really 100% clarity on that. So that was an interesting issue. So there's this $100,000 floating around, and we're not really sure what's happened to that yet, but that could be used towards some of these goals like outreach, and getting a better handle on it. So it really was a constituting meeting, very carefully done, to try to define goals, and next steps for this task force. Also, another interesting point is that they said it's not a committee or a commission, so it doesn't fall under the open meeting rules. So the people that are on that task force can talk to other people about what's going on without having to be an open meeting. So that was interesting too.
Yeah, nice thing about being a task force. You can talk to each other, you can make decisions outside of public meetings, so you can move much quicker and be more
And
flexible.
they are under, they're basically a task force that reports to the select board, so. That's the
Cool.
other thing.
I don't think I have anything to report. The only thing I'll add to Eric's planning commission report was that we do have a timeline for when we're going to talk about different topics, and that might be nice for the housing committee to know. So I'll just share it here in case some of our members watch this later. But basically, it's the next meeting on the 16th is talking about housing typologies and allowable uses. In October, we'll talk about dimensional reforms and site design and resources. In November, we're talking about clustering and incentives and scenario testing. Scenario testing being, some of the changes that we're proposing to make. Like, what would the outcomes of that be? Are there any kind of unexpected consequences and things like that? So I think that's good for us to keep on our radar. And we, on the quarterly schedule, we won't be meeting before then. I think our next meeting would be in December. But individual committee members could certainly attend and participate as members of the public, or reach out to me or Eric directly. So our next meeting would be December 9th. Do you guys know if you'll be available December 9th? I know December can be a tricky time.
Just a sec, I just have to
It's okay.
check my phone over here. All right, let's see, December 9th.
In theory, that's open for me, but I know I have some obligations to be with my daughter in the UK at some point in December, so not sure which days those will be.
Well,
Some
I'm
things are
definitely
out of my control.
I'm definitely in town because I'm in the hospital that week, so I should be available.
Okay. All right, I'll check with the others, but let's expect December 9th. And then as we get closer, if we think that we won't have a quorum, then we'll figure something else out. Frederica, would you be willing to be acting chair during that meeting?
Okay.
I will do the work of setting up the Zoom and making sure that the agenda goes to where it needs to be. And I think kind of doing a collaborative agenda. I mean, we talk about the same things every meeting now, so the agenda really doesn't change much anyway, but okay, cool.
Okay, is there any other business we have?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Is there any reason not to move to adjourn?
Are you good, Frederica?
I'm good.
I would like to move to adjourn.
Second.
Second? All those in favor? Say aye or yes. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll circulate a draft